Back up, she snapped, voice slicing across the brittle air. You don't have any claim, read the date on the exhibit. Her hand, knuckles white, held the battered folder high. Flashbulbs from the surveyor's camera sparked along the ruined siding. I said, read it out loud. The tall man in the dark suit took the page, lips pressed flat. March 19th, years before the rest, he said, shaky. This can't be right. It's right, she cut in, firm and cold. Snow creaked under boots behind them. Deputy, you want to see the original deed, she called, eyes locked on the faded seal. Breath fog hung between faces. That's not legal, the man tried, but his voice barely rose. The lawyer's jaw worked, silent. For a moment, nobody moved, tension so tight it felt electric. Then the wind snapped and the deputy stepped forward. To understand how she ended up staring down a lawyer, a sheriff's deputy, and a man who just tried to sell the only thing she had left, you have to start at the very beginning, just before sunrise, with no roof over her head and only a handful of clues from a dead man. A bitter wind pressed through Ashpines County's courthouse steps, striking deep beneath Avery's second-hand jacket. She tucked her knees under her chin and traced the embossed county seal on the eviction notice. Case No. AP 22408, final, printed so plain there was no room to argue with it. Her phone was dead. Her wallet's last bill, damp from the night before, fluttered when she moved. Used envelope, official stamp smudged. No one walking by so much as looked her way. 2 hours ago, she'd slept on somebody else's floor. Now, at exactly 18, she owned less than what fit in a torn duffel, except for two things her grandfather had left behind: a battered index card, warped from moisture, and a metal key fixed to a string. She remembered his voice, low and stubborn. Don't mistake simple for worthless, Av. Not everything is what it seems. Someone behind the thick glass rapped. The county clerk's window had opened. Avery stumbled up, one shoe stiff from a broken sole. Avery Donlin, the receptionist called, lips barely moving. That's me, her voice cracked. She eased forward, squinting through the smear of her own reflection at the smeared nameplate, MARILYNV, probate. This just came for you, hand delivery from the estate. The woman slid across a thick envelope, county seal, heavy stock. Avery's hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside was not relief or rescue. No check, no apology, no family note. Instead, another index card bearing a line, her grandfather's spidery handwriting, always capital block letters. Car number 7, Ashpines, you'll know, 41 MI Northwest. Underneath, a crude, hand-drawn map in the same ink. She blinked away the tightness behind her eyes, turning the card over and over as if a real goodbye might appear. If you've ever watched someone hand out your future as if it were their property, and you felt hope slip through your fingers, keep listening. Sometimes the worst day is only the first step toward the truth. Doors swung closed inside, boots squeaking on linoleum. She bundled her bloodless hands into mismatched gloves and left the steps, her new direction not home but northward, a line on a wrinkled map, a question she couldn't let drop. Her car, boxy and ancient, sat wedged in half-melted November slush. She folded into the cracked driver's seat, the map balanced on the dash, and lit the engine. The windshield fogged with her breath, a fine mist. 41 miles northwest, she murmured, remembering the way her grandfather would assign chores, always vague, always a test. Back then, family meant Sunday fried chicken and biting jokes. Now, she remembered her uncle's harsh laugh at the reading of the will. That's all she gets, if she can even find it. Headlights cut uneven lines through outdated two-lane highways. Tree limbs scraped at the roof. She hit the high beams, scanning for the branching service roads sketched in pencil. She missed her turn twice, the second time ending up at an abandoned gas station, trembling just enough for an old woman parking beside her to do a double take. You lost, young lady. Avery shook her head, but her voice betrayed her. Just need a bit of a map check. The woman gave a slow, knowing smile. People still come looking for Ashpines rail. There's nothing left but scrap. Avery tucked her hands deep into her pockets. I've got my reasons, she said. Back on the road, her doubts punched harder with every passing mile. Her mind drifted between the stinging humiliation of eviction and the hard, practical lessons her grandfather embedded in childhood. If they tell you it's worthless, look again. Pine gave way to undergrowth, pavement cracked into gravel. Her phone, revived by a dying battery, lost reception. She followed the map's crisscross through icy, rut-scored shortcuts, silent, no houses, just the vast bone clatter of winter woods. Finally, at the edge of a frozen meadow, she saw it. Not a cottage, not even a tool shed. Rusted siding, half covered by thorns, a number 7 scorched into what used to be a yellow paint job, an antique train car long since disused. The tracks underneath vanished beneath leaves and ice. She hesitated before exiting the car. The cold bit sharper here, her boots cracked through firm snow. The car loomed, windows dull and rimed, a padlock sunken into the side door. She pressed the first key from the string into the lock, twisting until it gave. The door swung open, and a waft of stale wood, engine oil, and something almost sweet drifted out. Avery climbed inside, her footsteps muffled by dust. The once luxurious seat sat collapsed, fractured beams arched overhead. Along the far wall, pigeon feathers curled in a forgotten draft. She moved toward the front, every board creaking louder than her breath. In the northeast corner, 3 floorboards looked just slightly out of line with the rest, one with a barely visible groove along its edge. Her pulse hammered. The card's instructions seemed distant and surreal. Northeast corner, 3 boards. She crouched, ran her fingers along the boards. A nail had been forced up just enough to grip. With a rusty iron rod scavenged from beneath a bench, she tugged at the first board. Dust rose in silent clouds. Board by board, the layers yielded, until the third gave way and a dull thud told her she'd struck metal. A military-style lockbox rested below, already drawn ajar. This, she thought, this is what I get. The box's hinges whined. Inside, she found a folded document stamped with a rail operator's crest, aged and yellow, a thick, unopened envelope sealed with wax, one more index card, Exhibit 14C, original. There was also, shockingly, a short letter in her grandfather's clumsy block print. Avery, if you're holding this, it means the rest have their reward, but not all prizes mean what they seem. There are things that don't go through banks or courts. Find Miss Oakes, she alone has the ending sealed. Avery's vision swam. She folded the letter carefully and hid it in her coat. Her hands shook, the words blurring. Bearer bonds, the kind her grandfather had spoken of with something like awe, sat in a wax-sealed bundle. Beneath them was an original deed, dated March 19, years prior to anything discussed in probate. A distant engine rumbled. Avery snapped up. Outside in the bright morning snow, a black SUV crunched to a halt. 3 silhouettes spilled out, her Uncle Mark in a fleece, a county deputy with a clipboard, and a tall man she recognized but had never spoken to. The executor, Glenn Burnett, her grandfather's attorney only by assignment. Miss Donlin, Glenn called, voice flat, we have a few questions about your presence on this parcel. Avery slid the box's contents into her bag. I'm on my own property, she said, not quite as steady as intended. Mark barked a thin laugh. That's only if you've got the right paperwork, which I'll remind you you don't. The deputy frowned, checking a sheet. Ma'am, the estate was settled yesterday. County says this lot's already in resale proceedings. Avery kept her back straight. I have documents you'd want to see, originals before probate. Glenn stepped forward, coat brushing the decayed metal, eyeing her with professional distance. Is that so? May we see them? Avery reached into her bag but stopped halfway. Maybe in the county office, not here. Mark rolled his eyes. There's nothing new, Glenn. She's playing detective. Let the county handle trespass. Glenn hesitated. You have until noon to clear your things, Miss Donlin. Auction closes tomorrow. Avery weighed her next move. The cold sliced through her resolve, but she stepped up. If I can prove you shorted me from assets that weren't included in the probate, the original deeds, would that change anything? Glenn's gaze sharpened. Proof is in the filings, that's all the law cares about. She nodded, memorizing each expression, each movement. Guess I better get my proof to someone who cares. She left before anyone could block her way. Avery barreled into Paragon Legal on Cedar Street, the only law firm that would answer her call. The secretary, harried and skeptical, ushered her after half an hour into a cramped meeting room. An older woman, proud steel-gray hair tied back, met her with reserved warmth. "Miss Donlin, Agnes Oakes, you said you have something pressing." Avery dropped the deed and the envelope on the polished wood. "My grandfather told me to find you." Agnes drew the deed close and peered at the fine print, her brows rising. "Original company deed, with a codicil, and what's this? Bearer bonds." Avery gave a shaky nod. "He said you'd have the ending sealed." Agnes scanned the letter, lips pressed thin, then slid open a file drawer to compare it with estate papers. "This changes everything. The executor's claim, all based on amended records, these originals, this codicil, would have excluded the car from the main probate." She slid a page across. "This is enough to halt the auction, but you'd better move fast. The county processes parcels at noon tomorrow." Avery's thoughts raced. "Glenn and my uncle, they're rushing the resell." Agnes tapped her finger, rings flashing. "And they know this car is more than rusted tin. You're in a dangerous game now. I can file an injunction, but you'll have to present the documents in person. County likes faces, not faxes." She checked the clock, eyes narrowing. "Hearings like this, they drag every doubt into daylight. You up for it?" Avery swallowed. "I don't have a choice." Agnes's gaze softened. "He always said you were stubborn, just like him." Avery managed a thin smile. "No one ever meant that as a compliment, but I'll take it." Night pressed in as she left, the courthouse looming across the square. Tomorrow, noon. She clutched her grandfather's letter so tightly the edges dented her palm. When she reached the train car again, her uncle's pickup was parked half on the weeds. The passenger window rolled down, Mark's face pale in the dim light. "Hey kid," he called, softer than before. "What are you really up to in there? You think you can beat the system?" Avery kept walking, keys jingling. "No system to beat. I'm just not letting you cheat me." He swore under his breath, then louder. "You're not old enough to know how this works. The rest of us, this is our shot too." She stopped, frowned. "You had your shot. Granddad made his choice." Mark's grip on the wheel whitened, jaw clenching. "We did what we had to. You think you're the only one struggling after he passed." "Don't try to paint me as the thief, Mark." Avery's face felt raw from banked frustration. "I know about the bonds, about the original filings. I've got the paperwork, just waiting for a judge." His scowl deepened. "Because one old man scribbled your name on a drawer bottom, that's not how the real world works." She didn't answer. His words stung, but they slid off her like snow on steel. He watched as she walked away, headlights tracking her up the drive. She spent the night at a pay-by-the-hour inn, documents spread across a plastic desk. She called Agnes 3 times before dawn, voice growing hoarse. Each time, Agnes responded. "Be early, bring the original. Don't trust anyone you don't have to." Dawn frost layered the courthouse steps as Avery arrived, evidence box slung like a shield. Inside, the hearing chamber hummed with fluorescent anticipation. Glenn Burnett, all pressed wool and cool distraction, smoothed the edges of his legal pads. His junior surveyor hovered at the window, fiddling with a tripod. Mark waited by the door, fidgeting, trying for indifference but landing on guilt. Agnes joined Avery at the long walnut table, voice a hush. "You ready? Just stick to the facts. Let the documents speak." Across from them, Glenn arranged his notes. "Surveyor, can you confirm parcel 14C was settled last week?" he asked, pointed. The man adjusted his glasses. "According to county filings, yes, but there's a lot of old paperwork here." His eyes flickered to the battered box at Avery's side. Agnes went next. "Your Honor, we submit the original company deed dated March 19th, compelling evidence the parcel was never legally transferred in the prior probate." Glenn's brow furrowed. With respect, that's not possible. My records, he flipped his binder, hands trembling. Avery's voice rose clear. You're missing the signed codicil. It predates every amendment you filed. Check the seal, the date. Mark snorted. She's waving scraps around. Anyone could type that up. The deputy stepped forward, badge reflecting in the morning light. Let me see. Glenn straightened, smoothing his tie. This is improper procedure. There are filings. Agnes ignored him, sliding the original document across. The judge on the bench leaned over, peering at the wax. Avery's hands were ice. Check Exhibit 14C, original, she said, steady. You'll see whose name is on the land. Flashbulbs blazed as the surveyor documented every signature, every margin note. For a beat, it felt as if everything, every cold night, every dismissal, every stolen future, hung on the turn of a single paper. Glenn's face drained white. It can't. March 19th. Avery stared him down, fierce. She stood, voice echoing with every lesson her grandfather had ever drilled. Back up, she snapped just as she had outside. You don't have any claim. Read the date on the exhibit. Glenn, lips tight, read aloud, March 19th, years before the rest. His voice stumbled. This can't be right. It's right, Avery cut him off, iron in her voice. Deputy, you want to see the original deed? She flashed the folder's battered edge, seal shining in the flat light. The deputy nodded, stepping forward. Glenn's protest barely registered. A week. That's not legal, trailing off as cameras snapped. The judge's gavel cracked down. Enough, the original deed is recognized. The parcel never belonged in this probate action. Auction is null. Mr. Burnett, as executor, your legal responsibility extends to full restitution. Mark lurched from his chair. You can't, she's just a kid. Agnes leaned in, soft but razor-edged. Next time, don't bet your career on someone else's shortcuts. Glenn, sweat beading at his brow, looked cornered for the first time. I didn't see these records, his words evaporated. Avery let the adrenaline ebb as justice, real and visible, unfolded around her. Agnes squeezed her shoulder. The deputy ushered both Glenn and Mark from the chamber, their arguments barely more than mutters. The courthouse crowd broke into applause, a sharp, spontaneous rebellion. Ash Pines County filed charges against Glenn for filing false probate. Mark's attempt at a quick flip became a black mark on his record, blocked from county sales for 5 years. Agnes stayed behind, a quiet island of competence. She shifted the original deed toward Avery with a smile. He wanted you to keep it safe, not for money, but because you're the only one who looked past the surface. Avery exited into sunlight she hadn't felt in months. Surveyors snapped her picture by the old rail car later that afternoon, news vans trundling up the frozen track for a glimpse of the first real owner. Word spread quick, vindicating. Glenn lost his license, Mark left with less than he'd started, and the car was officially hers. But Avery didn't care for showmanship. That night, she sat on the worn seat inside car number 7, the wind whistling softly through cracked glass, her grandfather's card propped against the window. No one interrupted, no threats lingered. For the first time, she felt the cords of old expectations loosen enough to breathe. Some legacies weigh us down, others force us to stand up straighter and keep going. Avery realized the lesson wasn't about money or even proof, but the grit to see things through, no matter who tells you to stop. If you've ever been handed scraps and told that was more than enough, remember this. Sometimes everything you need has been quietly waiting for you, just out of sight, ready for you to find it if you have the courage to look. She sat for a long time as the sun faded to molten orange beyond the frost-caked windows. Car number 7 was as battered as memory, but inside, Avery finally felt ownership settle over her, not like a shackle, but a heavy, unexpected cloak. Her breath curled pale above the seat where her grandfather used to sit, whittling at scraps of wood or writing a line she'd never been allowed to read. Her phone, spare and half-charged, buzzed in her coat. A text from Agnes, all's done, deeds transferred, you're clear. Avery smiled at that, the sort of wry, lopsided smile her grandfather had favored. The way the news wrote it, she was some tenacious country girl who'd outlawyered men twice her age. She thought of Mark, probably already halfway out of town. Even now, she didn't want revenge, only the quiet right to keep what little family had left her. She pulled the packet of bonds from the envelope, hands trembling for the first time since morning. They meant home repairs, maybe an actual bed, perhaps even a roof so the snow wouldn't trickle through at midnight. A soft scuff at the door startled her. She tensed, but the knock was only Agnes, voice brisk as ever. Hiding from the excitement? Agnes asked, boots crunching on rime as she ducked inside. Avery shrugged, eyes glinting in the odd half-light. Just needed to see it, to believe it's real. Agnes offered her a square of chocolate, unexpected, a gesture from someone who'd already done more than she had to. You did well. Not many your age could have combed through that mess. Wasn't sure I'd make it, Avery admitted, breaking the chocolate with shaking fingers. Sometimes it felt like everyone wanted me to just disappear. Of course they did, you upended their plans. Agnes scanned the interior, the odd blend of decay and memory. You have any idea what this car's worth, not just the relic, every land right attached. Avery laughed softly, shaking her head. Honestly, not really, and I don't care much. I'm not selling, at least not for their price. Smart girl, Agnes tapped a scrap of paint curling by the window. The county'll stay grumpy, but they'll get over it. You planning to live here? Avery blinked at the absurdity, then found herself grinning. Maybe while I work, roof needs patching. I could rent out the land, fix the place up, just need someplace to stake myself. That's as fine a plan as I've heard. Agnes slipped her business card onto the bench. You keep this, and if lawyers come sniffing again, you call me first. No more going it alone, Avery. A pause hung between them. Agnes searched her face, a consideration, something almost motherly. Your grandfather, he had a hard time trusting anyone. I think that's why he left it to you in his way, not because you'd keep the secret, but because you'd look for the truth. Avery bowed her head. I miss him, she managed, voice trembling. Even now, part of me hoped he'd left something more like a letter, a real one. He did, in a way, Agnes nodded at the battered index cards. He knew you'd follow directions. Doesn't sound like much, but sometimes the trail is the message. She hesitated at the door, digging a thermos from her bag and pressing it into Avery's hands. Warm up, you earned it. Alone again, Avery sat, sipping coffee as the light slipped away. For the first time since the will had been read, she didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's property. She was anchored, roots threading down through cracked boards and frostbitten earth. She sorted through the train car, rolling back years of detritus. Under the bench, she found a metal tin, its lid warped but engraved with careful initials, J.D. Donlin, her grandfather S. Inside, a photograph, the image faded but unmistakable. Him in uniform, standing in the door of car 7, her as a small child seated on his knee. She smoothed the corners, throat tight. Not everything is what it seems, she murmured. Maybe that was the legacy he wanted, more than a deed or bonds, but the stubbornness to keep looking. A knock rattled the metal once more, this time softer. Avery's heart thudded, a little less guarded now. It was Tom, the surveyor, his camo jacket bright against the snow. He lingered at the steps, hands open, not threatening. Heard you're official now, he said. Figured I'd bring these. He handed over a packet of photocopied maps, property lines drawn clean and precise. Avery thumbed through. You didn't have to. Tom shrugged. Could have just done my job, but his gaze darted around the old car. Didn't seem right what they were trying to pull. Most folks around here know how your granddad was with rules. Figured you'd want the real boundaries. County'll send a copy, but these are better. She wanted to argue that he was just being neighborly, but the gesture clung to her like winter sun. Thank you, she said quietly, for not pretending it was fair. He shrugged again. Sometimes people forget this place is full of stubborn ghosts, but I reckon you got more grit than any of them. Avery smiled, small but honest. Could use a few less ghosts, maybe. Tom straightened, stamping his boots. If you need a hand with repairs, let me know, not just saying that, rail men stick together. She watched him walk away, his silhouette swallowed by darkening pines. Her stomach growled, reminding her that ownership didn't solve hunger. She scavenged canned soup from the duffel, heating it over a tiny camp stove while the wind moaned through seams in the siding. She had no bed but the bench, no guarantee tomorrow would be easier. But she was still here. The train car's shadows flickered in lantern glow. Avery ran her hand over the table, smoothing dust into patterns. She thought about her uncle, about Mark's stammering protest, "You're just a kid." Was she? Maybe before, but not now. The night deepened. Outside, headlights arced past, then disappeared, a last look from the press or a neighbor. She locked the door, the solid thunk reassuring. Sleep didn't come quick. She wrote long lines in her notebook, the questions settling into plans. 4 weeks turned to 6. The wind softened, snow melted into brown grass. Each day, Avery rose to fix one small problem, a pane replaced, tar paper stretched, a section of siding painted with money from pawning just one of the bonds. She found a hardware store job stacking bolts and answering questions from old men about sealant and nails. One morning, a knock at the door rattled her awake. She braced herself, reflex still wired for threat. But it was only Mrs. Contreras from up the road, carrying a grocery sack and a thin-lipped smile. "If you're staying, you might as well eat right," the woman declared, pushing the sack into Avery's arms before she could protest. "Used to know your granddad. He kept my boys in line. Figured it's my turn to return the favor." Avery, speechless, managed only, "Thank you, ma'am." "You keep it up, you'll have the place looking new," Mrs. Contreras replied, glancing approvingly at the newly cleaned window. "We look after our own, remember that." She left, but the message lingered. "You aren't alone here, not quite." Spring quickened. Agnes called once a week, her tone shifting from lawyerly concern to something kinder. "Land grant is settled, taxes paid, still want my number handy." Avery snorted. "I'm not burning any bridges, but I think I can handle the rest." "You always could," Agnes replied. "Your grandfather would be proud." One rainy dusk, Avery caught her reflection in the streaked glass, older than before, jaw set, eyes bright and alive. She tacked up the old photograph of her and her grandfather behind the stove. It watched over her as she planned the summer repair schedule, insulation, new locks, and a small garden plot in beds she cleared from briar. The world never stopped testing her. County inspectors dropped by twice more, searching for code violations. One found a leaky pipe and shook his head but left grinning after Avery offered coffee and an explanation. Another surveyor came, this one less kindly, but left empty-handed, her documentation complete, every line stamped and filed. News of her fight reached further than ash pines. A letter arrived with a faded return address, scrawled in a spidery hand, her grandmother's cousin in Cedar Rapids, who remembered the old line and enclosed a photo of the train car in its heyday, bright yellow against a field of wildflowers. "Knew you'd make us proud," the note read. "Never give them an inch." Avery found herself less worried about hunger, more about what to do now that something was her own. She started sketching blueprints during long, stormy evenings, lists for a tiny library, a bunk, a wood stove for winter. She found herself counting days less and dreaming more. On the first truly warm day of May, a small crowd gathered at the edge of the property. Children from Ash Pines Elementary, led by their teacher who'd read about Avery's story in the local, climbed aboard for a tour. "This used to take people all the way to the city," Avery explained, guiding them through the uneven aisle. "It's been here a long time, holds more stories than I can count." One boy, gap-toothed and excited, tugged her sleeve. "Is this your train?" She knelt, meeting his eyes. "You know what? Yeah, but it's ours too, you're always welcome." After the class had gone, Agnes arrived again, as she did sometimes, not with legal papers but a brown bag lunch and a tired smile. "You turning this into a museum?" she teased. "Something like it. Thought people should remember what was here, not just what's gone." Agnes nodded. "That's a good legacy." Silence spread, gentle and companionable. Finally, Avery spoke what rattled inside for weeks. "You think all that trouble, court, the threats, the cold, was worth it?" Agnes considered a long moment, gaze steady. "Worth is tricky. Some things you only know if you fight for them. This," she swept her hand to indicate the car, the field, the sky. "This you earned. Not many can say the same." Avery smiled, heart strong. "He'd have liked that, I think, the fight, not the mess." Agnes laughed. "Trust me, he'd have relished the mess too." By summer, new wildflowers edged the rails. Avery's garden gave up radishes and early peas, and the patched roof no longer leaked each time the rain swept in. She'd stashed a bit of money. Job applications came in from curious out-of-towners who'd read of the girl who won a train car and kept it. One late afternoon, Avery visited her grandfather's grave, flowers bundled in her hands. She sat cross-legged on the grass. "I found it just like you said," she whispered. "Didn't let them take it. Might take me years, but I'll turn it into something good, I promise." Wind brushed through the pines, as if in answer. She leaned against the gravestone, letting the peace settle, the last outlines of anger fading. The fight was finished, not because she'd won, but because she'd made something of the wreckage. That night, sleep came easy in the rebuilt train car, windows open to cricket's song and clean air. The calendar turned, months darting forward. Avery's life slipped into a new rhythm: work, repair, dusk talks at the door with neighbors who stopped by. She watched as strangers came and went, all wanting a piece of her story, a headline, a lesson, a glimpse of hope that outlasted the county's greed. She didn't mind so much. As the car grew a little brighter, roots pushing deeper, she understood her grandfather's lesson at last. Nothing is ever only what it seems. Given scraps, she'd built a home, a promise, and something even stubborn men in dark suits couldn't auction away. The night before the anniversary of her grandfather's death, Avery found herself alone in car number 7, pipe smoke lingering faint in memory, bonds spent on what mattered. She traced the initials carved into the bench, recalling the old man's rough hand steadying hers when she'd first tried to cut her name into the wood. She spoke aloud, voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for trusting me, for making me fight." The stars blinked steady overhead, the old wounds of eviction, of loss, of fear dulled with every breath. In their place grew stubborn, hard-won hope. A train whistle sounded in the far-off valley, echo only, long vanished, but Avery heard it and smiled. The world, she thought, is full of locked doors, but sometimes all you need is a battered key, a map drawn in love and stubbornness, and the will to open it. She settled back, the future hers at last.